What's up, Vape fam? Sorteal here, and welcome to the Vaporworks Lab. Today I have a little bit of news and advocacy for us. The FDA recently denied 4.5 million PMTAs. Now, these 4.5 million PMTAs were filed by one company, and if my memory serves me right, it's the company that filed a ton, 4.5 million PMTAs on behalf of a bunch of smaller companies. Now, the FDA's reasoning for this was that they did not include an environmental impact analysis. And I kind of thought the vape community was going to get behind the company and start screaming at the FDA, but that didn't happen, luckily. Everyone seemed to have been like, hey, if you're going to submit 4.5 million PMTAs, make sure you fucking do it right. So I was actually really proud of us on that, because the FDA was right. You know, if you're going to do that, make sure you do it right. And the FDA should have denied them. They didn't have everything they were supposed to have. They should have denied them. And that still leaves like 2.25 million other PMTAs. So I was kind of proud of the vape community on that. We landed on the right side, and it really showed that the vape community actually cares about truth and science, not just yay vaping. Alright, in other news, a small town in Massachusetts called Brookline recently passed an extremely authoritarian-esque law. The law basically says anyone born in the 21st century cannot ever buy tobacco or nicotine products. So not just until they're 21. They didn't raise the age cap above the national average. They said ever. So if you were born on January 1st, 2000 or after, you could never buy a tobacco or nicotine product for your whole life. This is just it's so un-American, it really makes me sick. It's an authoritarian-esque law. It's an archaic law. I'm shocked that it's allowed by the Massachusetts State Constitution. Not only is it allowed, but their Surgeon General actually applauded the law, which is sick. I think Grim Green kind of said it best in a tweet. He said it was a slippery slope, and I completely agree. It's a slippery slope that I'm shocked anyone wants to get anywhere near the fucking edge of in the United States. This law is so un-American, it makes me sick. Now, it's going to be an absolute logistical nightmare. I feel for the police force in old Brookline. They haven't really addressed exactly how it's going to be enforced. They haven't addressed how it applies to anyone, say, just passing through the town that doesn't live there, but say you get pulled over for not using your turn signal and you got a bunch of vape gear in your car. Also, just like any kind of flavor ban or prohibition, it immediately creates a black market. That has not been addressed either. But this actually creates a unique black market, because it creates the opportunity for the older generation to sell to the younger generation. So while I don't like the law, it's going to kind of be interesting to see just how spectacularly it fails. So yeah, we'll watch for that one. Alright, in other news, the World Health Organization recently released its 8th report on the global tobacco epidemic. This report actually said very little about tobacco and a whole fuckload about vaping. They don't call it vaping, they call it electronic nicotine delivery systems. And everything that's in this report, it sounds like Mike Bloomberg wrote it himself and said just release that, but change my signature to World Health Organization. It's absolutely insane what they're saying now. They're basically saying where vaping has not been banned, it should be extremely heavily regulated. Clive Bates said, "You can't get beyond the opening pages of this dreadful report without encountering activist talking points, false or misleading statements, and really poor policy ideas targeted at vaping and other low-risk alternatives to smoking." He went on to say, "The Bloomberg operation is now doing more harm than good with its founders' money. They have rented WHO as a mouthpiece for their anti-scientific and unethical ideas." I 100% agree. That is exactly what the Bloomberg Foundation has done. They basically bought and paid for the World Health Organization's tobacco wing, and now they're just running it however the fuck they want. And nobody in the World Health Organization is saying a word about it because they want the money. I mean, it's essentially a business. It's not a organization. It really should be the World Health Business, the World Health Company, because they're just taking money for policy, which is what Bloomberg does best. I mean, the WHO essentially gave this man an award for interfering with middle and low income countries by giving money for policy. They would give money to these small countries that did not have a very good budget, their, health branch, and then tell them you should pass this policy. Well, now that, health wing of whatever said country is, Bloomberg's giving them a larger funding than their actual government can afford to give them. So, of course, they're going to say and do whatever Bloomberg says so they can keep getting that money. It's really an unfortunate chain of events that's going on there. All right. Also, with the World Health Organization, COP9 is coming up, and everyone in the vape advocacy community, they were chomping at the bit to get to this thing because it was going to be our chance to finally debate the World Health Organization on their stance towards vaping. It was going to be our chance to point out their misinformation and lies and to actually get some of the facts out there to a broad audience of people. Well, the World Health Organization released a statement, and here's what it said in all its weird WHO jargon. The Bureau decided that the reports prepared by WHO, Comprehensive Report on Research and Evidence on Novel and Emerging Tobacco Products, contained in document FCTC COP99 and by the Convention Secretariat, challenges posed by and classification of novel and emerging tobacco products contained in document FCTC COP910 should be presented for information, and that related substantive discussion should be deferred to COP10 in 2023. Essentially what they're saying is we are not going to debate anyone. We're not going to debate anyone on vaping. We're not going to debate anyone on low-risk alternatives to smoking. Not at all. We're just not going to do it. It's our convention. Hell with you. You can do it at our next one. But if you honestly think that in 2023 they're going to allow debate on the subject, then you're sorely mistaken. They will simply change the rules again. That's all they're going to do. They do not want to debate us because they have no science. They have no facts. They have nothing to back up their stance towards vaping. They're simply doing exactly what Mike Bloomberg is telling them to do. It's so unfortunate. It's so unfortunate. All right. Charles Garner said, we are trying to raise public attention to the fact that this system is broken. He went on to say, we, the very people who are affected by recommendations that come out of these events, have no voice. We are denied a seat at the table on the assumption that we are biased, while NGOs that are clearly biased against tobacco harm reduction and countries with state-owned tobacco companies are both welcome with open arms in FCTC debates and decisions. It's very true. They're pushing us out. They're pushing us out and basically saying we're biased. But then they're letting in groups and countries that are clearly biased, like that don't even try to hide the fact that they're biased because they couldn't hide it even if they wanted to. And they're welcome with open arms, but we are not. And that whole reason is because we have science and facts behind us. They do not. So I guess we'll see what happens. I mean, I don't know. Let me read one more quote about this whole COP9 thing. This is from Clive Bates, who is a tobacco control expert and former director of Action on Smoking and Health. Whatever the timetable, we can rely on World Health Organization to produce anti-vaping propaganda and push for vaping prohibition at every COP. casually and carelessly putting the lives of millions at risk. He went on to say the problem isn't what goes into the meeting agenda, but the fact that WHO actually wants to ban vaping while cigarettes are available everywhere. That's 100% true. And that all boils down to money. It boils down to money. And that's unfortunate. It's really unfortunate. I got one more article about the World Health Organization. Now, I'm going to have links to all the articles that I got these quotes from that I, referenced throughout this whole little news bit. This is a LGBT campaigners accuse World Health Organization of ignoring science. Now, this article actually comes from express.co.uk, so this group is out of the United Kingdom. Essentially, what this group did was they filed paperwork. They filed everything they needed to be able to speak at COP9 because they felt the LGBT community had more smokers, per capita, so to speak, than heterosexuals. And as far as the UK is concerned, and I believe the US, that's true. In the UK, something like 23% of the LGBT community smoke compared to 15% of heterosexuals. So they felt like their community was not being heard. So they wanted to go and they wanted to speak on lower risk alternatives to smoking in relation to the LGBT community. Well, of course, the World Health Organization, not wanting to talk at all about low risk alternatives to smoking and vaping in particular, denied them. Even though they filed everything they were supposed to, they did it all correctly, and there was no other reason given. Basically, the reason given was the one I just said about they not going to debate at all. Not only are they not going to debate, you can't go in there and just make some kind of statement about vaping. You can't just give a miniature TED Talk in COP9 about anything dealing with low-risk alternatives or vaping. It's really sad. I mean, this group actually accused the World Health Organization of ignoring science, which is extremely true. That's all they've done in regards to vaping. Now, the UK is actually one of the biggest donors to the World Health Organization, not just as a overall organization, but as far as a lot of their gatherings like COP9 and previous. So it would be interesting to see if the UK actually does anything politically to put pressure on the World Health Organization. I don't know if they will or not, but I would really love if they would. They honestly should. They give a lot of money out and they're not being heard in return. Alright guys, I've actually got some good news in the world of vaping. 2 good news stories, which is rare as hell in vaping. One is that New Zealand enacted their smoke-free law that essentially put in place a nicotine cap. It's a 20 milligram per milliliter nicotine cap for freebase and a 50 milligram per milliliter for nic salts. It also implemented a sort of flavor ban for places like convenience stores, grocery stores, super centers, those types of places, but allowed any flavor that anyone wanted to be sold at actual vape shops. Now, a lot of people in the advocacy space were upset about both the nicotine cap and the flavor ban in specific locations. Now, the nicotine cap, I'm not all that against really at all. I don't really see why you need to go above either one of those. Anything above 20 milligrams per milliliter in freebase, to me and most anyone else I've ever talked to, becomes harsh. And the 50 milligram per milliliter for nic salts is pretty much the industry standard right now. Juul's one of the highest for nicotine in their products, and that is 50 milligrams per milliliter. So really not much should change as far as nicotine goes. The flavor ban is also, a lot of people are very anti this flavor banned in particular places. And I understand that because the thought process behind it is anywhere that cigarettes can be sold, there should be vapor products, and vapor products in as many flavors as possible to give smokers that option. But this is one of those things where we are going to have to make a concession. It sucks, but it's just true. Essentially what happened is vaping took such a large chunk out of the tobacco tax revenue that the New Zealand government was getting that they got scared. So everyone was kind of nervous there at first because it looked like they were thinking about implementing a flavor ban across the board. So I think we kind of dodged a bullet in one way and kind of got fucked in another. But I don't think that this is something that's going to stick. I think as you see more and more smokers in New Zealand switch to vaping, and that sin tax goes down and down, and the government makes a transition to compensate in other areas, you'll see that flavors eventually down the road are allowed to be sold everywhere. Now, that's just my take. That could be, far over hopeful optimism. But, it seems like New Zealand just got scared, essentially. But then rational thought kicked in, and they actually, kind of tried to solve their problem, but also not screw over their smokers at the same time. So that gives me hope. Overall, it looks like it's going to be a good thing for New Zealand. They're not facing a flavor ban. Their nicotine cap, in my opinion, is extremely fair. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with this law as it goes on. So I'll definitely keep up with that and let you guys know. The other bit of good news is, I don't know if you've heard, but in the Philippines, basically the Bloomberg Foundation got in a lot of trouble. The Filipino Congress asked the head of their FDA if the FDA had ever taken money for policy. His response was essentially no comment. Well, that didn't fly. So they basically made him answer, and he said yes. Then when they looked into it more and found out, it was Bloomberg Foundation that had done this, what Bloomberg Foundation was proposing as far as the regulation they were attempting to purchase. And then they looked into vaping and they looked into the science and facts behind it. They actually did exactly the opposite of what Bloomberg wanted. They decided that they wanted to pass some pretty progressive laws towards vaping. They wanted to promote vaping to smokers as a cessation tool. So they're on the verge of passing some of the most progressive laws on the planet. Probably only beat out by the United Kingdom. I think from what I've read, it's going to be even more progressive than New Zealand. And that is a huge change for the Philippines, whose president was kind of promoting gangs killing nicotine users. It was absolutely insane. It's such a 180 for this country that I just want to applaud the Philippines and their government. Now, this has not actually been enacted yet, but it looks like it is well on its way to becoming law. So, again, we'll keep track of it and take a look at it and see, exactly what's going on there. But I'm extremely hopeful for both New Zealand and especially the Philippines. New Zealand was already pretty progressive towards vaping and had embraced it, but the Philippines was the exact opposite. But now it looks like they're headed in the right direction. I can only hope that kind of 180 happens in Canada, also in the United States, really, because vaping is a smoking cessation tool that should be championed across the globe. It should be looked at as a medical miracle as opposed to some kind of health risk or big tobacco trying to hook a whole new generation. That whole ridiculous bullshit. So yeah, that's all I got for news and advocacy. Still vaping on the nitrous. Like I said before, I will have an update for this in just a few days. By the end of this week, I will have an update on this and my whole experience. This is what I've been using all this week. I take it to work. I've been hitting a few of the mix here and there for different flavors, but overall, I have been using this the vast majority of the time. I'm still extremely liking it. I'll give you guys an update on this and other things that are going on with the channel when the update video for the nitrous comes out. Until then, you guys vape on, and I'll catch you all later.